Hi, I'm Jonathan Groff, and if you are not a fan of the muscular forefoot of a marine gastropod mollusk, don't be abalone with Jake Hogan.
Don't be alone with Jake Hogan.
Welcome to Don't Be Alone with Jake Hogan. You're you, and I'm Jake Hogan. That's good enough for both of us. I want to encourage you to please write me at dbawjk@gmail.com if you have any comments, suggestions, or a question you'd like me and my guests to answer. I really rely on your questions. I need them. They can be about anything, any silly thing, any important thing, any part of your life. Just send it in, and you'll get credit for being a good Hoganite and supporting the show. Also, feel free to tell people about the show. Feel free to send people a link to this show. If you like it, just send people. They might like it too. I'd like to encourage people to see it. We've had our audience grow a lot in the past couple of months, and I really love it, and I love the fact that people like it. So I want to keep that going. Today we have a very cool guest. We have Jonathan Groff. He's a TV writer, former stand-up comedian, very cool guy. There's also a very famous Broadway actor named Jonathan Groff, who has won Tonys, and you see clips of him singing as King George and Hamilton. And I am going to try to not confuse the two of them, because one is clearly a writer who should be here, and the other one is a Broadway star who I wish I could get, but I don't know. So we'll see what he has to say about show business, about working with people. And he has a specialty that I've done a couple times, which is coming into a show that already exists, that somebody else created, and getting on board and helping that show become what it's supposed to be, helping develop it to its fullest. And we'll talk about how that works. All that ahead with Jonathan Groff.
Don't be alone with Jake Hogan.
So here we are with the wonderful Jonathan Groff. Spring Awakenings, Hamilton. I mean, so much that you've done. I can't wait to get into it.
I have to imagine that how long do we have to keep the Jonathan Groff thing going to get your listenership past a certain threshold? Okay, I'm game.
I made a few minutes.
Okay, I'll be back. Soon you'll see.
Right.
You'll remember you belong to me.
You don't sound as good as what I've seen on the internet.
There's a lot of processing even in Broadway. They get in there and they tweak it. The sound engineers, they get in there and
I thought Broadway actors do it live.
They can ride those things.
Yeah?
And the mixers do it real. I have Hey, do we get salty on this show at all?
Absolutely.
Okay. First time I became aware of other Jonathan Groff.
Right.
I am OGJG, by the way.
Okay, so you were the Jonathan Groff before there was a Jonathan Groff.
I was already pretty obscure and struggling before Jonathan Groff burst onto the scene.
Right.
No, I had an IMDb page and I had a listing, right, and my credits. So my old assistant, I think you know my old assistant, Allison Floral. Do you know
Sure.
Allie, lovely person.
Sure.
She delighted in finding information about other Jonathan Groff.
Broadway Jonathan Groff.
Broadway Jonathan Groff. So she first brought him, I think my manager, Tim Sarkis, knew about it too, but also Allison maybe had my name on a Google search.
Sure.
So she saw a Google News thing, so she saw it popping up, and then she researched a review of him in Spring Awakenings. I believe it was a gay man who said, well, the real revelation is Jonathan Groff. Young Jonathan Groff, who towards the end of Act 2 exposes a pair of spank-worthy buttocks. So that, of course, got printed out and papered all over my wall in my office, which I share.
The same has been said about you in many writers' rooms.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
People love your spank-worthy buttocks.
I've gotten a bunch of jobs out of it.
Yeah, fantastic.
It's kept me going.
Yeah, I mean,
even into the end stage of my career. The buttocks are still spank-worthy.
Harvey Weinstein, you were one of the few buttocks that Harvey Weinstein went after. I don't know.
I actually spent an afternoon in a small room punching up Milena A movie in Italian, he wanted to punch up the subtitles. I was working in New York. I got called, I did a thing, and I got asked to join this weird little writer's room, and Harvey was there, and he wanted to punch up the subtitles to an Italian movie. So I don't speak Italian. He said, doesn't matter. He wanted to put in fart jokes. And he stole my potato chips from lunch.
Really?
Yeah, he reached across his desk and took my potato chips.
I've worked for both Weinstein brothers, and they were both equally horrible.
The other Jonathan Groff thing is I once was in New York City for a... I probably told this story on another podcast, forgive me, but I was in New York City for
Get out.
an upfront.
We don't do repeat stories here.
Okay.
Go ahead,
and it was for Sony TV show, NBC upfronts, came back, or NBC, yeah, I think whatever. I came back and they'd sent a car for me, and
which they generally don't do.
They
for
don't
writers.
do any. They don't generally do anymore. I think it was a special thing. And Leah Michele had been on my flight. Which I didn't really recognize her, but she got off the plane before me because she I think was in a slightly better class. I was in first. She was in first. I was, I think, in business. Luckily, another thing they used
Business
to have.
Plus?
I don't think so. I think they have to do that for writers. But anyway. I got down to baggage claim, and there was a driver with a sign that said Jonathan Groff, and young, sweet Leah Michele was there arguing with the driver, trying to send him away, saying, he's like my best friend, and he's not going to be here for another 2 weeks. So, I don't know, you got bad information, sir. And I was like, come on, lady, it's 2 o'clock in the morning.
Did you explain it to her?
I did, and she was dumbfounded and baffled. Yeah. Here's an endearing Jonathan Groff mix-up.
Okay, tell me.
It makes me love my wife even more than I already do.
Yeah.
I still to this day will get like calls saying like, please, could you show up in support of a thing?
This benefit.
The Stonewall, the dedication of the Stonewall Museum. We'd like to have you speak. And
I would love you to show up.
I should just show up.
Just show up. Yeah. I'm here.
I've registered the disappointment on maitre d's, front of house people at restaurants, especially in New York City, when if I make a reservation under my name and I show up and I can see a little bit of the light drain from their eyes.
Do they make you show your driver's license?
I think they do. Yeah,
sure,
that's happened. Yeah, but my wife. So years ago, we got this letter inviting me to be from Anna Wintour, inviting me to be her guest at her table at the Met Gala Costume Institute, the Met Gala thing. And my wife, I showed it to my wife, expecting her to just, laugh along with, another confusing. And she went, well, it could be for you. I mean, you're a very successful television writer, and she could know that that's a thing.
A lot of TV producers get invited to the Met Gala.
And it was so sweet. It made me love her.
The amount of email I get from Anna Wintour is just insane, even to this day. And I'm not on anything right now.
She's always trying to get you to brunch things, pool stuff.
Listen, well, we're very much alike, she and I.
Yes.
We're both very demanding, both very specific.
Yeah. Big sunglasses.
Big sunglasses.
Hey, I have to tell you, I'm in a good mood because I just came from the dermatologist.
Oh, good.
Who said everything was fine.
Cancer-free?
Totally. I hadn't been in many, many years, and I hadn't been in so long. It was a new doctor to me, a woman, and Kit Boss, our mutual friend, got into my head this weekend, and I mentioned that I was going to see a dermatologist, and immediately, man or woman? I was like, it's a woman in Beverly Hills. And he goes, she's gonna check your taint. And I said, what? She goes, that's like a place where melanoma shows up because nobody looks at it. She's gonna check your taint.
Well, wait a second. I have a question.
Okay.
Because
by the way, this relates to a funny thing that I've heard you say.
Okay, so
it gets back to you, which I know is important.
Everything gets back to me.
Yes.
Melanoma, generally speaking, is from sun damage. And so the taint is not the most sunned part of our body.
Speak for yourself.
Okay.
No, yes, I think that's true. Although I guess it's the kind of thing that could probably maybe circulate in your body and migrate. I don't know enough about it.
All right. So you go.
So she didn't check my taint. She did a cursory look down the front of my drawers.
Oh no.
But that could have been for other reasons.
And did you demand, hey, come on.
I
check the taint.
I was told there'd be taint action here. No, I did not.
You did not?
I declined because I was relieved.
I would have hopped up on the table, taken my legs, swung them over my head, and say, lady, check it out.
Get in there.
Get in.
This relates to us a funny line of yours that I believe it was my friend John Pollock shared with me, that you once said, I think maybe walking with him on a picket line, or maybe he heard you say it on a podcast or something. You said that when you strip for a doctor, you sometimes can hear an audible sigh from your doctor.
Worse. So I went to a doctor
Made me laugh
visit,
so hard.
a doctor visit, and at a certain point they check your prostate.
Yeah.
And this is a doctor. Okay. This was an older doctor, like at the time probably 65-year-old doctor. He's been doing this for a long, long time, and so he says, "Guy, okay, we got to do the thing." He puts on the glove. He lubes his fingers up. Just bend over the table. I said, "You sure we have to?" "Yes, we got to do this. It's not a big deal. It's not a problem." And then he proceeds to put his finger into my ass, and as he does, he goes, "Oh." The noise he makes, oh, like he's gonna vomit. And he's like, "I didn't ask for this," but like I said, then I can only assume it's me. I can only assume he's been doing this for many years. But something about my asshole is horrifying.
Probably done 250,000 of them.
At least. And then, does he do this every time? Go, oh, or is it something about me? I gotta believe it's me. Jonathan,
yes.
Thank you for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I've been listening and I like it. And I was like flattered when you said I would want you to be on it someday.
Well, you have.
And I did realize it was to kind of initial, because the banner on the thing on the Spotify or iTunes, whatever, is going to say Jonathan Groff, and you'll get some people who are going to.
Yes.
So I think we like disabused them of that notion pretty quickly. With
so far. But I am going to have the other Jonathan Groff's picture on this thing.
As you should.
Ad. No, you're a natural for being here for several reasons. There are many people in the writing industry that we know who are very delightful writers, delightful company. But, we can be an awkward bunch. And not everybody has sort of the background you do. You're a former stand-up.
Yep.
And you're a performer. You're an actor. You have show busy chops. You're not just a man behind a keyboard. You have things that you can do. But the reason I have people on the show is so that they can solve my problem.
Understood.
And one of the reasons that you're here is that you're very successful as a very, 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 very talented writer. People think of you as a very funny, very talented writer, but they also think of you as a guy who can come in and join in a show that's in progress or about to exist.
Yes.
And say, John's going to be on it. He's going to be either the showrunner guy or the second in command guy. He's going to be there to help the people who created the show bring it to fruition.
Right.
That's a fantastic position to be in.
I've been very lucky, and I've gotten to work on really cool stuff that I never would have really been able to do because it wouldn't have been my, I've had my shots and will continue to take them.
Right.
But the secret to my success is failure.
Okay.
Of course, to some extent.
So then I should be as equally a success as you, because I failed certainly as much as you have.
Well, yeah, we've all.
But I didn't get to co-run Blackish or any of the sort of the major shows that you've done.
Yeah.
Happy endings.
Happy endings. I did. Yeah, that was the first show that I kind of came on as showrunner to help a new writer who had never run a show before. Brilliant, funny guy, David Casp. Jamie Tarsis was an executive producer on that, and we had met but had never worked together. And it was a great opportunity. It was the first time I did it, and it really went anywhere. I mean, it was still kind of a failure. It met 57 episodes, but it was
love that show.
People love that show. It has a small niche, rabid following, and all of that. And it was a wonderful cast. And the Russo brothers, I got to have the Russo brothers experience.
Didn't you have to marry a co-star if you worked on the show? Didn't you have to marry a co-star of the show?
Adam Pally and I were married briefly.
Okay.
So yeah, David and Casey Wilson, of course, set the standard of that. That's what had to happen.
Sure.
The first time I did it really was. And this is why I say failure was kind of key, because I did this kind of a debacle of a show called Father of the Pride, which was weirdly, I think Jeffrey Katzenberg took the created by credit, because it wasn't actually technically a WGA show, because it was animated. You can do whatever
you want. It's the Wild West.
It's a Wild West. So I think that weirdly had a created by Jeffrey Katzenberg thing, but then I was the developed by and showrunner with John Pollock.
Sure.
That failed miserably, and we can talk about that.
Right. Well, hold on. Let's talk about that.
Okay,
I'm excited about the failures.
Well, I mean, it was a animated show about the White Lions that worked for Siegfried and Roy, an attempt to do Shrek style animation on a weekly basis. I think NBC bought it. There was a big. Jeffrey First Class, of course, flew the entire executive staff of NBC up to Siegfried and Roy show.
Oh,
no,
Las
to Las
Vegas.
Vegas. We watched a show. We had dinner. We did a pitch in a big bungalow. And I remember, I think Courtney Kang, who's gone on to become a wonderful writer, was an executive at the time. And she got to sit between Siegfried and Roy on this big fluffy couch in this bungalow at the Mirage where we pitched the show. It was, kind of a working class bunch of lions that worked for Siegfried and Roy. John Goodman, Cheryl Hines, Orlando Jones, Carl Reiner, which was a career highlight. Oh my God. And he was hilarious to work with. All those people were great to work with. But it was, a couple things. First of all, I think NBC thought they were buying, I don't know what they thought they were buying. I think Jeff Zucker.
That's the trick. That's what Katzenberg's trick is.
I know.
He's like, dazzle them with so much stuff you don't know what you're buying until you buy it. And then at a certain point, a few months or years later, you realize, oh my God, we have this weird thing and we bought it. What do we do?
Well, it's called Joe Biden.
Yeah.
My quip that if I did social media, I would have quipped Quib-Biden was kind of the most recent thing.
Right.
The combination of Quibby and Biden, because he's an incredible salesman. And I love Jeffrey, brilliant guy, but he's good at selling it. And by the way, it was a really funny show. The problem was, I actually stand by this show. We had incredible writers, Cheryl Holiday, Barker and Weitzman, Rob Cohen, Vanessa McCarthy, John Pollack was a great partner, great people, John Ross, super funny people. It was, NBC, I think, thought they were buying like a soft family show, which is kind of how they promoted it, because that's sort of what DreamWorks had done. But then I had all these ex King of the Hill and Family Guy writers. We really went kind of for a harder edge. That was one problem. The other real problem, though, Jay, is that about 9 months into production of this very expensive thing, Roy Horn was attacked on a stage by a tiger and nearly killed.
Yeah, right,
so that's a little bit of a...
Sure.
And Jeffrey could not have seen that
Some people can ride that
coming.
wave, though. Come on. Incorporate it into the show.
Well, in Jeffrey fashion, he basically, pleaded with NBC executives, you got to keep this thing going. This is helping keep Roy alive. We can still do this.
Right.
And
this is what Roy would want.
Those words were said.
Yes.
And I think it was true, actually, because Roy was, kind of recovering. But
through his screams of pain, he said, keep the cartoon alive.
Basically, in German.
Yeah, okay.
Don't be alone with Jake Hogan.
It all culminated with me and John Pollack at the upfronts, because the show stayed on the schedule and got on. We spent a lot of money on it. And John and I went to the upfronts in New York City and were in the audience, and they had, without really anybody vetting it, DreamWorks had arranged for a video of Roy and Siegfried together, now 10 months after the accident, to say like, oh, you're, Roy, this is fine, advertisers, 2,000 advertisers in Radio City Music Hall. This is okay to do this. And by the way, we screened an episode of it and it played very well. It was funny. The show really was funny. And this huge, Jeff Zucker says, oh, here we go. Here's Siegfried and Roy to tell you that it's okay. So they did this pre-tape thing, huge screens come down at Radio City Music Hall. And he was not okay. I mean, he's not okay.
I'm laughing, but I can only imagine
not okay.
hugely injured.
He was dragged off stage by a 1,000-pound tiger.
I understand.
By his neck.
Yeah.
And he was really not okay.
Yeah.
And plus he's German to begin with, so he's kind of hard to understand to begin with. By the way, they were lovely guys, Siegfried and Roy. Actually, they're really funny.
Video footage of this?
Oh God, no. Probably somewhere deep in the NBC archives, somebody has video, could probably dredge that up. I don't think anybody. Jeffrey's very good at controlling the message, so I'm sure he made it go away. He was not okay. So John Pollack and I had that unique thing of the air goes out of the room. 2,000 advertisers are now and we, I always joke that if we had had big briefcases on our lap that were open, like old school attaché cases, we would have closed them up, click, and then excuse me, walked our way out of Radio City Music Hall to get on a plane to go back to obscurity and never to be heard from again. So that failure freed me up because that came and crashed and burned.
You got freed up to do happy endings.
Well, no. So Father of the Bride died. This is 2004, and I did my very first supervising a writer who had never made a pilot before, which was a very talented guy who's gone on to a huge career. Again, bigger than mine, is Rodney Rothman, who is now doing films and Spider-Man, and he was in the Judd Apatow world for a long time, and then did his own stuff. He had
Jump Street kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. He's very he was a producer on a lot of things, get him to the Greek, all that stuff. He had a sitcom for NBC called Early Bird, which is based on a book where he goes, he really did this, lived in his late grandpa's retirement condo in Florida. Right. So we had kind of a high school vibe, except it was old people in a retirement community. And it's my first job supervising, and I liked it. Rodney was great to work with. And since then, it was something like, oh, I can do this. I think we got to work with Paul Feig, which was wonderful as a director. Right. And I was like, oh, that could be a skill set. I think coming out of Conan, I think one of the things, in addition to failure, is also some humility. Because as the head writer of Conan, and I know I'm jumping around, but but I got that job about 9 months into being there. And I think it was partly because I wasn't the best writer. I was a good writer and a funny writer, but I was also good at like figuring out like how to produce my pieces, make them come in on time, make it happen,
Probably pretty good with people.
Like the joke I always say is like, like there would be writers who'd be like, oh, I had this incredible idea. I wrote that sketch up. Great. Did you tell Bill Tull, the prop guy, that we need a mailbox full of blood? Oh, no, I forgot to let him know. So just let Bill Tull, the prop guy, know that we need a mailbox full of blood for the sketch that you wrote. So I think I was good at like being that guy, in addition to like kind of, and there was an episode we did on the Circle Line, and Marsh McCall, our old pal, late great Marsh McCall, who had hired me at that show, was sick, and he couldn't be there, and I ended up sort of stepping up and being like the head writer for the day, kind of, as we did this basically very ambitious live show. This live show went well. And I think Conan and Jeff Ross, his producer, were like, he's really funny and he gets it. Right. And so I think part of that is now to this day, like, I don't assume I'm the funniest guy in the room or have the right answer all the time. That's just insight. That's just self-knowledge. Self-knowledge, yeah. Because you would agree. Oh, absolutely. Everybody. That's kind of that's your rep. Certainly not the funniest guy in this room. No, not the funniest guy in the room. As a matter of fact, you're here. That's what the other subject. What's it like to be not the funniest guy in the room? It's not. I don't know what that's like. That's uncharted territory. Yeah, it's weird. And by the way, being the showrunner who always has the answer, that can be good if it's just your show and it's your baby, and maybe if you're that kind of impresario who strides above it all, like this colossus who is the one who everybody answers to, and if you can execute and get people to execute your vision, more power to you. I've always been much more like, I'm really funny, I'm going to hire really funny people. I'm going to hire Gail Lerner and Courtney Lilly. Well, actually, they were already hired on Blackish, but Courtney Lilly we hired anyway. Or Josh Bicel or whatever. Great people, and let them do their job and let them do their thing, and then also go like, that joke or your story fix here is better than mine, right? And doesn't have to be my answer, of course. And so being a little bit of like, but here's the humility magic of the show. The humility of the showrunner is this: even when you say that idea is better than mine, the blessing of the idea that it's better than mine, that it goes in the show, makes it kind of your thing too. Yeah. So it's like, of course. It's a no-win. It's like a no-lose situation. It like, hey, we need a joke to get out of the scene. The showrunner said, well, what about this? Oh, fantastic. Yeah. The showrunner said it's great. And then, or the showrunner picks somebody else. Oh, the guy's a genius. Yes. It's just the chair. I think a lot of it's the chair and everybody wanting an answer from who's ever in that chair. I think that's true. Yeah. There's a lot of that. But you know what else it is too? I think and I think the best showrunners I've seen and worked for and with, it's also taste. Like, honestly, right? It's like choosing what's the thing that makes the most sense and feels right. And going like, I didn't come up with that, but Jay did, and that goes in, even though damn, it's not and I did that. Personal taste, it's taste knowing the tone of the show. Yes. Like, it fits the show. It may not be even your thing, but it's like on our show we do it this way. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. So here's the thing. So you're listening, you're good at listening, you're funny and creative. We'll get to how that got to show up somewhere. From your background, it doesn't immediately seem clear that you'd become a stand-up comedian and a comedy writer, but okay. I have an answer for that. Yeah, what is that? Well, my dad was funny, and he was, on some level, there's a performative aspect. Yeah. Look, there is a level of like, he's got to write 10 to 15 minutes of new material every Sunday for a sermon. Yeah. And I think we also, I grew up in the golden age, as did you, of like all of these incredible shows to watch and be influenced by, like, Mary Tyler Moore and the old Dick Van Dyke Show and Andy Griffith, and then All in the Family and Sanford and Son and Good Times, and then the sketch shows that all of a sudden from Carol Burnett, you know, then into Saturday Night Live, and a little later Kids in the Halls, SCTV, huge. So you know, I was able to have that thing sort of like
bubble up, but a lot of people did, true. And didn't become you, right? So like, what is it? I'm gonna
give my parents a huge shout out.
All right,
just as I gave my wife a shout out.
They're big listeners of the show, by the way. So.
Oh
yeah, sorry.
They're dead. They
doesn't mean they're not listening.
They are listening. I think I like to think that. Okay. They here's a shout out to them. We had no money. My dad was a Episcopal priest. My mom was a book editor, teacher, then a book editor. And I remember calling my parents and saying, Mom and Dad, I'm thinking about it. I've had this experience. This is maybe beginning of senior year, end of junior year, whatever. And I'm thinking about applying to business school. And they were like, oh, okay. Oh, sure, if that's something you if that, okay, no, that's great, that's great. And like they got their mind
reluctance.
Okay. And then probably 3 or 4 months later, and a mutual friend of ours figures into this story, we can get to that. I saw but I'd always been kept this, I'd acted in high school and done a little bit of stuff at Brown, but had gotten intimidated by the actory people, so I hadn't done much, but I was still interested in that stuff. I saw stand-up comedy live the first time in my life here in Los Angeles, the summer of 19 I said, I think I want to try to do that. So 3 or 4 months later, I called my parents. I said, I think I'm going to start writing stuff and try my hand at stand-up comedy. And they were like, that's great. That makes so much, like literally I could almost hear them hang up the phone and go like, that makes so much more sense. They were relieved.
Wow.
So how blessed am I?
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
What made you stop doing stand-up and start writing?
I did stand-up I started in after college, started in Boston, do open mics, and I did it, and that was my career. I kind of look at my career as like a movement towards stand-up, which was writing discrete small amounts of material. Then about 5 years into that, I started working with a bunch of comedy sketch people, David Cross and John Benjamin and Carrie Prusa and John Ennis and Lauren Dombrowski and all really funny people. Helene Lantry up in Boston, David Waterman, too many people to name. I'm going to forget somebody. I apologize. But we were in this sketch group up in Boston, and that was longer pieces of material. I was writing sketches now and performing in them. And then Conan was sketchy again. I wasn't a joke writer or a monologue writer on that. It was sketchy toward finally writing half hours. And I think it was a little bit the courage to put something down on paper that was longer and also not my own thing. Right. And I think that was another thing. The thing I always say to young people starting out is like, stand-up was good for me and it helped me hone my voice, and I have relationships and that helped me get my first jobs that were meaningful. You know, people who stepped up and said things to help me get my job at Conan, or I worked for Jon Stewart, and that was through some stand-up relationship friends, friends who stepped up and said nice things. But I always say to younger writers that with stand-up, I was in the right house with comedy, with stand-up comedy, but I was knocking on the door of the wrong room. And once I knocked on the sort of like, hey, you can write stuff for other people and have it produced, whether it's sketches that you cast other people in, or that stuff for Conan or bits for Conan, desk pieces, sketches, or eventually like a half hour, that's where things took off. And also where these sort of, I think some emotional intelligence I had from whatever, being the kid of a minister and a book editor, and having that radio station experience in college where I ran something and knew how to be kind of a leader. I was serviced so much. My career took off once I started to like write for somebody else. Right.
Let's go back to Happy Endings. Yes. And then go to Blackish. So Happy Endings. Yes. You're there. You're helping David make his show. What do you think? How'd you ride that wave between having an idea and standing back and letting David, get his voice heard?
It kind of happened organically, and David will speak to this. He and I actually, I think there's a Happy Ending.
David will not talk to me or be on this
There's
show.
A Happy Endings podcast.
Okay.
And we actually talk about this.
Oh, great.
That Casey Wilson and Adam Pally have hosted, and Josh Bicel helped make happen. It's great. And I think we're on the first episode, and we talk about it. I think he was a screenwriter, baby screenwriter, had really maybe sold one idea, I think. But he had agents who sort of set him up with Jamie Tarsis, and she's like, there's something here with this guy. He's got an idea for like a Friends type show. But he was really not experienced. I remember like when he and I were trying to rewrite some sides during the pilot process because the sides were not popping to
Right.
doing the job. Sides are the pages that actors have to audition with.
They audition with.
You know, and they're usually from the script that you're shooting. So we had
I never do that.
use different, you create new
Always.
ones. Yes,
Always
I've learned
create
that
new
trick.
ones. Yeah.
I've learned that trick. Yes, because at my first pilot, I didn't do that. And by the time I got to the table read,
Everybody
Carrie
hates
Burke
it.
was like nodded off at the table
Exactly,
read.
because they've heard it 1,000 times.
They heard it 1,000
So
times.
you write new sides,
Yes.
and the new sides that you give the actors to audition with should have who their character is, should have
Yes.
quite a few jokes,
Yes.
maybe more jokes
Yes.
on their side. And because the actor's usually reading with a casting director, make sure the other person in the scene has very little to say.
Yep.
And the other, and also,
Yeah, don't want a long monologue for
No, from the casting
Susan,
director.
Susan Vash, even though
and then
she's delightful.
great. I love Susan Vash. But then also, I would also throw in some difficult, long speeches.
Yes.
And I would also make maybe a few tongue twisters and a few
Yeah.
other things.
How about some physical comedy?
Physical comedy for sure.
Maybe make them pick up a thing awkwardly.
See how they do.
Yes,
You know,
it's
all
great.
that stuff.
I
All
agree.
that testing stuff. And that none of it's going in the show.
Right,
It's just for
exactly.
the fun of the sides.
Right. So David and I were writing some new sides, and he just was like, this is really hard. Like it was hard for him to write with somebody else. Maybe it was just me, but I don't think so because, actually maybe it
Were
was.
you doing that thing where you stand over him and look really physically
Go.
close into his face?
And then just go.
Yeah.
But we were writing together, and then it started to get easier.
Right.
And then I was like, okay, we have a table read. We have a series of table reads coming up.
Right.
Let's bring in some friends. So I brought in, I think, Josh Bicel, Prentice Penny, Leela Strawn, wonderful writers, and who would.
I remember getting that. Oh no, you didn't call me.
Oh, Jay.
That's all right. That's all right. I'm not still hurt.
Jesus.
Right.
No, but I knew inevitably would come to
Okay.
this.
Yes.
He was at first like, I don't know if I like, and then it was like, wait a second. And then he brought in a friend of his who was a funny comedian, and he brought in two wonderful, hilarious writers who were friends of his, who were just starting out, but actually I think they've been on Robot Chicken, Daniel and Matthew Libman, Libman, super funny guys. They have a new show out called Mr. Throwback on Peacock, plugging somebody else's
Sure.
show because they're
All
great, with Adam Pally.
You don't have to plug shows on Peacock.
and
Everybody's
Steph Curry.
watching. Everybody's watching.
It does have Steph Curry, so
Yeah,
that's
okay.
cool. So he brought those guys in, and all of a sudden he was like, oh wait, this rewrite of our pilot script is getting funnier, and and I taught him like how you incorporate people's ideas, how you hold on to your ideas as needed, and like say like that's not really what we're going for. Try some things, and I think got him used to the idea of collaboration and being in a writer's room, and the wonderful power and mystery of a comedy writer's room. And now, I will say by episode. He tried to rewrite because he just thought he had to, and he felt dutiful. Like there was a second episode that we had that wasn't quite working, and he did a rewrite alone over the weekend and brought it in, and then it didn't quite work, and he was like, I don't want to do that again. And from then on, he was. I talked to him the other day about it. We had drinks, and he goes, I don't like not having two or three other people help me on something. I love a writer's room, and I love, and I think it's about like how do you articulate a vision that you can. And know your characters pretty well, but be also open to letting other people shape your characters. Like on Happy Endings, Alicia Cuthbert's character, Alex, who turned out to be very funny and really a wonderful character. She was not at all, we like to say innocent, but she was kind of a little bit played the dumb character a little bit to some extent, or the one who marches to the beat of a different drummer.
Sure.
That was not in the pilot really,
yeah.
because she'd actually done the bad thing. She'd run away from our lead guy at the altar and had hurt him. So she had a long distance. So like in the second episode, we were working on it as a group, in the first season with the writing staff, and Josh Bicel said like, what if we make her a little bit, goofy or a little off or a little dumb or whatever. And that's where that came from. And that was a whole character that he informed just with kind of like, maybe we could use that in this show. Like instead of everybody being so smart and fast all the time, she's like a step behind, but in a way is a step ahead, which is kind of what we ended up coming up with.
Fantastic.
And like you create that with your staff. And I think David saw the power of that and saw the power of letting people into
the
his
hard
show.
part about that, I think for a lot of people, not for me, I grew up in a very collaborative writing situation, which was called dinner. But but honestly, the hard part when you're running a show is having the wherewithal to say politely, we're not doing this.
Yeah, no.
And the no is the hardest part.
It is hard.
Sometimes when somebody begins speaking, that we're not going in that direction.
Yeah.
But you don't want to be rude to that person. They're giving their creative juices. They're
100%.
They're giving something. So you want to hear them out to the right extent, except it's
clock.
getting late. The clock is.
We're tired.
We have to finish. We're
Yeah.
getting tired, and so you have to be able to be strong enough to say, to convey.
Yeah.
I think you're a great writer. We're just not doing that now.
Yeah.
And if you're able to do that, sometimes becomes an overwhelming amount of work for some people.
It's hard. It's hard. It's taxing to make those decisions over and over. You know, making decisions, and you're making decisions all the time as a showrunner, is really hard.
Don't be alone with Jake Hogan.
So apparently Barack Obama, because he was aware of the tax, the tax it puts on your body and brain to make decisions all the time, apparently when he was president would limit the number of meaningless decisions he would have to make. So he would have his clothes picked out for him.
Right.
He would never want to know like a lunch menu or anything like that. And I would try to do that as a showrunner. Like, I don't care what we get for lunch. So I can't make that decision.
Right.
Because you're making these decisions, it does come at a cost when you have to say to somebody, like, as you said, I love you and I think that's interesting, but we're not doing that.
Right.
Also, I think it's good. One way I found is reminding, they're the writers who pitch stuff that blows up a lot of stuff that we've already kind of agreed on. So I would use the expression, we have dry land here, meaning this is, we got a beachhead here.
Yeah.
We don't need to go back, because if we did your pitch, you realize that would undo. And I've had even writers I love, who I won't name, but I've had to go, and then they go, oh yeah, you're right.
Thread pullers. We call them thread pullers in the room. There's some people I work with who are brilliant thread pullers, and they'll say they want the last, like, we're going to the table read, and it's like, let's go back to the board, and they start re-outlining the show. It's like, no.
Yeah.
No.
We got that. We're good.
We're good. We're going to read something. We need to fix this area.
Surgical.
So let's fix this area first.
Surgical.
But some people just love ripping it apart and putting it back together.
I know.
I don't have that kind of energy. Well, listen, we have not talked about Spring Awakening yet at all. So I'm very concerned about that. Like, was it weird getting naked on top of Leah Michele? Or, well, I'm confusing with the other one.
Yes.
I'm sorry. That's my bad.
We've been talking for a while about television comedy
I was just
writing.
so excited about the other Broadway, Jonathan Groff.
JJ. What's my latest thing I've gotten from him? I emailed him recently because, I actually finally saw Merrily We Roll Along. Oh. He was fantastic. I saw one of the last performances. Yes. Fantastic. Emailed him. He didn't get back to me.
All right. So now it's we've heard what it's like to be a co-exec / showrunner, second in command, and I appreciate that. I am going to try and do my best to usurp you, and be that guy for other shows at some point.
Well, failure. Here's my other recommendation: have come off of a failed pilot.
Okay, I can do that.
Yes. So that they've always come and asked me right after, like coming into Blackish 2014, I had written one pilot of my own and supervised 3 other writers. Who were wonderful. Yeah. June Diane Raphael and Kate C. Wilson had written something hilarious. I was supervising that, and 2 other things, and my own thing. None of them went. Yeah. And I was in a deal at ABC, and they asked me, would you help out on Blackish? Well, luckily I loved the pilot. Right. I didn't want to run another show right away because I was coming off of Happy Endings, but I think being available is definitely the first step. Right. And I think they hit you when you're a little bit on your back foot of like, a little bit on that one. By the way, it was a incredible opportunity to get to work on Blackish. Kenya has given me massive shit, rightfully, when I was like, Groff, we had to fucking lean on you to do that job. I was like, well, I just run Happy Endings. I just coming off these 4 pilots that flopped. I needed a minute to lick my wounds. Right. I loved the show and you from get-go, but he's like, yeah. All we offered you was the opportunity to help me run.
Of a lifetime.
And I realized that. Yeah. But being, so that's that. The failure part is that helps.
I handle that just fine.
Okay,
I got plenty of failure. So
good.
That's I'll get started. All right. So now here's a question. This is from listener. This is called listener mail.
Yeah.
Now it's time for listener mail.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Charlie Kogan, did he do those?
Charlie
for you?
Kogan did all that.
Yeah.
And for free.
Charlie Kogan is Jay's wonderfully talented musician, brilliant son,
who has concerts coming up all over Los Angeles.
He's
all
the coolest.
The time.
Yeah.
Dear Jay and guest, I find the state of the entertainment industry to be less original than it used to be. These days, it seems like everything is a remake, a reboot, a sequel, or prequel, part of a huge franchise or based on a ride at Disneyland. How can the viewers support truly unique films and television shows and hopefully give them enough of an audience for people to make more original content?
It's a great question, and it's a great observation. I agree to some extent, obviously. Like, I think the feature film industry is... I've heard people, though, talk about it. I was on some Zoom with industry professional types. I think it was Tom Eschheim, maybe, who was saying, like, the studios have overplayed the sequel to the point where, like, they're realizing they can't do it anymore, only, and that people want something else, which is why something, even though it was based on a toy like Barbie or felt like original and fresh, or even Oppenheimer, which is a biopic but still was different and not the same old. And I think you'll see things like that in a big studio level. So support those things. I do think there's always going to be, you just have to work a little harder and find the things that were original and funny that could be brought back, and or give those creators who made something original another chance to make something else interesting. I was just involved with a really cool show. I was a non-writing executive producer of a show called This Fool on Hulu, created by Chris Estrada, who starred in it, starred Frankie Quinones, who was amazing and hilarious, Michael Imperioli, and created by Jake Weissman, Matt Ingbertson, and Pat Bishop. And they were like real funny weirdo writer guys who did this hilarious show on Comedy Central called Corporate. And the show was, I didn't write it, so I can say this was brilliantly interesting, compelling show.
I saw it. I really
on
enjoyed
Hulu.
it.
It's really cool. So I think there are those things out there. Maybe just don't look for those things there. Like, you have to look for those. Like David Hemmingson was a friend of ours, was put on social media. So I was touting a show called like Last Trip to Yuma or something like that, that just came out. It was a small feature, or this movie Thelma that just came out. You have to like find the little things and go to the art houses if you can, or go to the niches of the recesses of Amazon and Netflix and watch those things, because they are on there. They buy everything.
Yeah, it's there. It's hard to support. I mean, does my one view really count? And it doesn't feel like those movies are forgotten. They're on the streaming services, but they're left there to sort of wither and die. I know that they keep track of everybody who watches, but it doesn't feel like they get the support they
understand.
need.
No, that's why I don't disagree with their assessment. I do think there's always going to be then, I mean, this is sad to say, and it doesn't help us with our job security, but find that stuff on YouTube and TikTok that is entertaining, and then follow that creator as he or she gets an opportunity to do something else.
I also think that the larger studios, they've been like on a cocaine binge of reboots and remakes and stuff like that. And while you're doing it, it seems great. Yeah, it seems great. But at a certain point, you realize it's a problem. Yeah, and now you have to change.
Well, you're eating the seed corn. Like, where's the next thing coming from?
Right, and it's also not working. Like there's so many things in the Marvel universe, and there's so many things that the prequel, and they're just taking shows that no one heard of and rebooting them for no reason other than their IP that somebody owns. It's insane. So that's not working as a policy in general.
I think
however,
that's true.
Last year Barbie comes out, so it's like, okay, well, there's an IP that
it's an IP, but it was done,
so it's the way everything's the way it's done
with this genius sort of way of doing it, and by a auteur filmmaker, to use a fancy word. Greta,
and also a woman was involved.
As a producer and as a I know.
Greta Gerwig, was she involved at all? No, yes, she was. No, that was Barbie was fantastic, and the Deadpool movie, which is a big hit right now, is really original and fun and fantastic. It just happens to be a major motion picture that cost $400 million, but also was really smartly done. Right, fantastic. So I don't know.
I mean, I think as in the television studio world, I always appreciated Sony Television Studios' attitude, because they were the one studio that was not affiliated with, and still aren't, a big network. So they were the ones who figured out, and this is going back 10 or 12 years, but the ones who figured out, like, what if we hit some doubles and singles, and all of a sudden we hit a thing that looks like a double, like Breaking Bad, and then it turns into a monster thing. And they took some more chances. And I think if people can think like that, of like less tentpole and more like, how do we hit a double that can endure and then become something bigger, as a series, for example.
All right, now it's time for a moment of joy.
A moment of joy.
It can't be your kids. It can't be your job. But what gives you joy other than that?
So the other day, this is probably a sign of early mental degeneration. I had my bike had been out in the garage for a long time. And had been outside sometimes too, because our garage is actually like a little guest house / office. So it had been sitting outside to not be in the way. And I was like, oh, I'm sure the tires have been sun damaged. I hadn't ridden it in a long time. And I'm sure the tires are sun damaged and the seat is definitely still kind of dried out. Whatever. And I saw the gears were messed up. And I was like, I'm going to take it to my local bike shop and get it tuned up, get new tires on it. And then I looked at it and I was like, oh, these tires are actually brand new and the gears work perfectly. I had done this exact tune-up 4 years ago. And I had never ridden it.
Oh my God.
I like to hike all the time. I'm not a lump. I do exercise, but I hike in Griffith Park mostly all the time. And
invite me. I hike all the time.
Let's take a hike sometime.
I would love that.
Okay, good.
I said I never hiked through Griffith Park. I would love to.
Let's go. We'll hike it and have lunch.
Okay, that's great.
Let's do that. We'll make that plan.
All right. But okay,
so I all of a sudden I looked at my bike.
Yes.
I discovered work that I had done, which is always like a mitzvah. Right. Is that the right use of that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And I was like, oh my God, I already did this. So I just walked the bike to the service station on the corner near my house, put air in the tires, put my helmet on, and this was last Sunday, went for this fantastic bike ride down the LA bike path, LA River bike path, which is, the LA River is what it is, but it was glorious and not busy. And I was like, and it was one of those just late afternoon summer, like LA is so beautiful that sometimes it's oppressive.
Yes.
And but it had turned, the heat also makes it a little oppressive, but like, it was just like, oh, I am leaning into the beauty of Los Angeles and serendipitously finding this bike ride that I didn't think I was going to get to take today.
Right.
And riding bikes, I find anyway, is it's definitely an old guy thing. It's definitely, old dudes like get into it a lot and they have the helmets and all that shit. But it's a great speed at which to experience the world. You don't get bored.
Traffic.
Yes.
Scares me. But it's all. And by the way, mitzvah, I may have incorrectly said it's the right use. Mitzvah is something that God commands. So that's something. So if that would make God happy. So if reusing your bike is something that would make God happy, that's not really.
He doesn't care that much about my bike.
Helping the homeless would be a mitzvah.
Yeah, that's a mitzvah. I didn't use it right.
That's not right.
I tried it. I'm not Jewish, but I love the Jewish people.
Yeah, my moment of joy, let me tell you my moment of joy. I don't know if you know this story, but there's a Dr. Levinstein I used to have, and he used to grease up his finger. We're running out of time. So I want to thank you for being here, Jonathan.
Oh my gosh,
Groff.
this was a pleasure.
Even though you weren't the Jonathan Groff I was expecting, I still think that you're very talented, and I can't wait to hear your next album. So I'm very excited about that.
Thank you, Jay.
I want to thank you, the audience at home, for listening or watching or whatever you're doing. Thank you for being here. Please share the show with somebody if you like it. And also write me at dbawjk@gmail.com if you have a comment or criticism or a lovely question that I can ask my guest. I would love it. And thanks for being here, and I'll see you next time.